It is a place of pride.
Growing up here was a pleasure. We had no real problems.
And heartfelt heritage.
Said, oh, you lived in Smoketown. I would say, oh yes, it was a very nice place to be. A lot of shops and a lot of things to do.
I don't think Smoketown has gotten the recognition it deserves.
Louisville Smoketown has nurtured those who are famous and everyday people.
We all knew each other. Neighbors knew neighbors. We went to each other's houses.
Education, faith, and family are among the solid building blocks.
The churches had weekday Bible study, so they always had something for the young people to do.
Changes have come over time, but the devotion still runs deep.
I became a better person through the experiences that I had growing up and interacting with young people of my age as well as families throughout the Smoketown neighborhood.
The Stacks have been silent for years, but this community of roughly 40 square blocks still contributes to Louisville's urban vitality. Hello and welcome. I'm Steve Krupp. You won't find the name Smoketown on most maps. However, it is clearly a place of local landmarks and legends. Mainly black, some white, and mostly blue collar in the formative years. Time has proven over and over that this is a neighborhood contributing to Kentuckiana's heart, soul, and a whole lot more. Kentucky's biggest city, Louisville, was on the fast track, emerging as a key center of commerce in the 19th century. The Ohio River became a critical gateway for imports and exports. Tobacco, bourbon production, and even brickmaking generated the first jobs in this community's very rich life. East of the city center, one neighborhood evolved as a haven for those needing a fresh start. Historians say it was a place for free blacks before the Civil War, as well as those receiving the gift of emancipation. The neighborhood would be called Smoketown, but how it got the name is something rooted in fact and perhaps folklore.
Everybody burned coal in those days. See, and in the morning you could just cut it with your hand. And I really, in my personal opinion, I think that's how they got the name of Smoketown, because between the hours of daybreak and 12 o'clock, it was smoky. It was really smoky.
Well, I heard that they had thing with smokestacks around, and different factories, and they called it Smoketown. And then because it was predominantly black, they called it Smoketown. Smoky, one of the terms that we have been called among the years.
And the folk that lived here used to go over toward the railroad tracks to pick the coal up that would fall off the coal trains, bring it back in their buckets or whatever, and they would use that to heat their homes. And so, coal has that sooty substance that it gives off. So can you imagine all the houses that were probably located here then and all of this smoke coming up?
My family lived in that area. The first generation would have had to have been in 1870.
Everyone knew everyone. Most everyone was kin.
Everybody knew everybody, and everybody corrected everybody's children.
Well, the neighborhood was, to me, it was just like magic, with that extended family thing. We knew everybody in the community, and we never locked our doors, never. The doors that those that did have locks, but it was a nice neighborhood. I can remember so well how close families were at that time.
I grew up in the neighborhood in the 40s and the 50s. And I would have to tell you, first of all, it was recognized in Shepherd Square to be one of the safest neighborhoods in Louisville. In fact, it used to be said that no one did anything wrong in Shepherd Square because there was always 10 people to stand and point the finger and say, that's the person that did it. You could ride, I used to ride my bicycle 10, 11, 12 o'clock at night through Shepherd Square. No one would bother you because everyone knew everyone else.
Also, it was a park right by called Ballard Park. You could go there and play basketball, play tennis, marbles, all the different games.
The formative years came in the same decade as the first Kentucky Derbies at Churchill Downs during the 1870s. It was also the period when Oliver Lewis would win the initial run for the Roses on board Aristides, and Isaac Murphy continued in that same tradition with 3 Derby wins during a period when black jockeys were clearly the stars of the sport.
Even when I was growing up there were a lot of factories in Smoketown, candy factories, pillow factories, a lot of factories smoked out.
These days, the Big Bat on Main Street is a huge tourist draw for Hillerich and Bradsby. The logo is known around the world, and decades before moving its operation to Indiana and back across the river, the company's early years were spent on Smoketown Spencer Street. While the community takes great pride in cherishing the operation as being the home of the Louisville Slugger, locals simply called it the Bat Factory. Other manufacturing operations would find a home here as well, companies like Enro Shirts. Milk, butter, and cheese would come from the Oscar Ewing Dairy once at the corner of Floyd and Caldwell. Individuals like Washington Spradling Jr. would be among the area's first black prominent real estate developers. He would start building homes across the city before the 1880s. Nurturing a neighborhood occurs in a variety of ways, and one important element influencing long-term stability came from Smoketown's churches. Feeding the faithful has been an ongoing task from its earliest days. Deep roots can be found at Little Flock Baptist Church. It was started several generations ago in 1867, just 2 years after freedom came to many of its founding members.
Churches played a great role, especially in the lives of the young people, because they had things for them to do. That was before the time of television.
And you had the Catholic faith. They had St. Peter Claver, you had Base Memorial, St. Paul, New Coke, a little further away, Mount Olive, where I attend. Just a number of religious institutions.
We're Jewish, and we had our synagogue a block away up on Floyd Street. There was a significant Jewish community in Old Louisville, in Allbacker Court, in that area in Old Louisville. There were at least 3 synagogues within walking distance, and the most religious in the Jewish faith believed that you should walk to the synagogue on Saturday and you shouldn't ride, and so there was a large Jewish population.
You better believe that everyone that could would get out and go to church and get that saving day, you know, that moment of being with their fellow members of church, also the people in the community, as well as family that may not live in the community.
The now closed St. Peter Claver Roman Catholic Church began services in 1907, and congregation members made it clear that responsibility to the neighborhood went beyond worship events. Father Simon Greesham was the spiritual patriarch whose vision launched a well-respected drum and bugle corps. Just around the corner, another legacy was born that's still a thriving entity today. It is called the Presbyterian Community Center. There would be several homes before settling down at 760 South Hancock Street. The 70-year run in this building started in 1929.
They had ceramics class, they had art classes for not only for children but also for adults. They had cooking classes. They just had a lot of different things that you know, if you wanted to do something with your free time, they had the facility as well as the class to do it.
And we learned to sew, we learned to cook, we learned to wash and iron.
You had a lot of games. You had ping pong. It was just a place to center and gather.
And these were the type of things that we did. But then we played jacks. And, I mean, this is all we knew, and this is what we did, and we enjoyed it.
Well, the role of the Presbyterian Community Center has been a center of activism. It was a place where people could meet. It was a place where the children could meet, play ball. It has been a positive change on a lot of young people's lives that they wouldn't have had if they hadn't had the community center to go to. And the community center was like another parent looking over their shoulder.
What the center was, and the whole neighborhood in general, was really a crucible for competition and confidence and whatnot. And so we had, as a neighborhood, everything that you needed to have.
Founded by John Little, a Presbyterian missionary in 1898, he would be a prominent decision maker in church and cultural events until his death in 1948. And Reverend William Shepard, once a missionary to the Congo, pastored Grace Church for 15 years in the early 1900s. Others would also give their time and talent here, including Charles Allen, who worked under Little, and was involved in a merger between Grace and Hope congregations in the 1960s. The two would take on the name Grace Hope Presbyterian. Since 1946, Fire Station 9 has had a home on East Breckenridge. Before moving in here, 2 other locations would serve Smoketown. The first on Jacob Street in the late 1800s, and by the 1930s, the second firehouse on Rose Lane brought great pride. It was an operation made up of African American firefighters. The firefighters from this station were pressed into service during one of the worst disasters the city had ever seen, the 1937 flood. Churches and schools provided places of safety. When the waters receded, many families here had to start over.
Even when the flood came, we had bought a house and had it remodeled with the money we got from a farm. And then after we bought the house, the 37 flood came along and just wiped the house out, and we couldn't pay the mortgages or anything for it, so we lost it.
If church and outreach were the glue holding Smoketown together, then education provided the ticket to a better life. Early on, places of learning here were basically segregated.
We went to Booker T for elementary and Jackson Junior High for the junior high school. It wasn't a middle school like it is now, it was a junior high school. And then, of course, to Central.
Those were the main schools for people to go to, for our people to go to.
Smoketown supplied their fair share of folks with scholarly pursuits.
And it was like having another home when you went to school. And if you did wrong, you'd get it both places, at school and at home. Because the mothers and the fathers, they were very much involved in raising their children, and they were very concerned that the children would do what they wanted them to do.
All my friends in the neighborhood went to Englehart. It was a public school on Brooklyn, Kentucky. And I went to the little Catholic school, was in an alley on Brook Street called St. Mary Magdalene.
It wasn't until the 1950s that the color barrier was broken at Male High School, and during the 70s, its basketball teams would win several state championships with players like Darrell Griffith, who would lead the University of Louisville to an NCAA crown in 1980. Smoketown native Lenny Lyles would have a remarkable career with the Baltimore Colts. His early years on the football field were spent at Central High School and U of L. Eventually, he would come back home and serve as a successful entrepreneur. This inner city community maintains a relationship with one of Kentucky's oldest television stations. Wave TV3 still calls the neighborhood home, and it would be the launching pad for Louisville's own Foster Brooks. And part of this town provided a platform for another prominent broadcaster, one making national history.
WLOU, 1350 in Louisville.
WLOU in Louisville, Kentucky.
Bill Taylor Showtime, 7:35 in the morning drive. We now have partly cloudy skies and 37 degrees.
WLOU, Soul Motivation Music, number 1.
William E. Summers III would become one of the country's first African-American radio station owners by taking over 1350 WLOU. Another native is regarded in a class entirely by herself, Atlanta television anchor Monica Kaufman.
I'm Monica Kaufman in Africa, and Africa unlike the one we think we all know. In the next hour, you will hear and see fantastic stories from a place that is both far away, yet surprisingly very close.
He never officially held elected office, but Cleo Mucho Bennett was often regarded as the mayor of Smoketown.
While I was a resident of Smoketown, I lived at 611B Lambton Street.
Darrell Owens would serve several terms as a Jefferson County judge. And across the street at City Hall, Eugene Ford Sr. represented the neighborhood's 8th Ward. Both are examples of changes following the right to vote. While downtown Louisville, especially 4th Street, provided a share of amenities to the community, in many ways, Smoketown was a city within a city. Many of the buildings still wear the names of products, goods, and services once marketed here. And a single street conjures strong memories of a very different time.
Well, Preston Street from Broadway all the way to Kentucky was businesses on both sides of the streets. We had our hardware stores, we had clothing stores, grocery stores, and I guess I couldn't go in there, but they had nightclubs and things like that. But it was really like 4th Street, really. That was our 4th Street.
The grocery stores were owned by whites, but there were a number of other ancillary businesses.
And I think Jerry's father had a grocery store on Preston.
You know, my father and my grandfather had a grocery in the Smoketown neighborhood for about 52 years on the corner of Preston and Jacob. And it was a neighborhood of families that stayed. I mean, invariably you had the child, you knew the mother and father, you knew the grandfather and the grandmother. It was generation after generation that stayed.
And then there were plants in Smoketown. Right on Preston Street, there was a place where there was a lot of men working there, and a machinery place on the side, barber shops, doctors, a dentist, and a lady that gave piano lessons. I remember that. And beauticians. It was beauticians practically on every corner in Smoketown. I think that was a main occupation then for young women.
Our grocery was the kind of grocery where you ran your tab on a book. We had a book with your name on it, and you know, it would say Smith, and every kid and grandkid of the Smith family would walk in and say, I got a quart of milk, okay, and they'd walk out the door and you'd put it down in the book, and then once a week, once every 2 weeks, Mr. or Mrs. Smith would come in and cover the grocery bill. I mean, it was that kind of, and so you knew if someone was jacking around, some kid you knew his grandmother, you probably knew his great-grandmother, that you could call and say, you know, we got a problem here. You know, your great-grandson just walked out with an apple. And every time I see Ali, he tells me it wasn't just apples he took. He takes great pride in going through the litany of things he says he took from the store.
Dixie Theater on the corner of Preston and Caldwell. You could go there for a nickel, you know. At one time, I was a cashier, and it was a place where you go to see the movies, of course.
Preston Street was also a showcase for entertainers like the great Ella Fitzgerald, Jimmy Lunsford, and Billy Eckstein, all at Clark Jefferson's Lions Garden. Even though the number 18 bus still runs through what used to be a thriving business corridor, stores along Preston like Sam Con Hardware pulled out as the era of malls and shopping centers were ushered in. Along Hancock Street, Skip Porter still runs the family auto shop, and not everyone has fled Preston Street. Decades ago, there was a Mason's Funeral Home. Today, the family operation is still intact. Just up the block, Rogers Funeral Home is still a force in the neighborhood, and that's been the case since the early 20th century. Across Broadway, the services of R.G. May remain in demand. He started in the late 1800s and is remembered by his granddaughter, Zephyr May Miller.
My grandfather loved this community. R.G. May's funeral home at that time came about as community. He would bury you free. Plus, during the Depression, he would feed the people. Didn't care about segregation and all that stuff.
She would leave us in 2004, but one of her greatest contributions would be the sculpture in the center of the neighborhood. The Boxing Gloves is a collaboration between her and renowned artist Ed Hamilton.
It says strength. It says come and try to knock me down, but yet I'll get back up. That's what it's all about. And as a child walks by there and says, I want to be somebody.
Boxing was a signature sport carried out from the Presbyterian Community Center, and a dedicated trainer by the name of Fred Stoner gave his talent to those unknown, as well as one man who is regarded as the greatest.
I mean, he was just an humble individual. He just didn't want it. But people recognized, people especially who trained along with Muhammad Ali, with Fred, they know what Fred has done for the African American boxers in this town. And if you talk with them, they would give Fred credit. But Fred would never take credit for any of that. I think he was in Ali's corner for about 3 or 4 of his first fights. Then Ali asked him to come with him to be his permanent trainer. He told Ali he didn't want to leave Louisville. He didn't want to leave Smoketown.
Smoketown not only provided a share of boxers, including the late Rudell Stitch, but also provided other sports teams. During the years of the Negro Leagues, one was fielded by the legendary Papa Khan, and many hold on to the memories of the Club Monday football team on Rose Lane and its connections to the mythical Jackson Academy. Smoketown today copes with issues of blight and despair.
One thing that hurt a lot was when we were going through a revitalization period. Housing Authority of Louisville, they were getting ready to move some people and take them into different locations of the city. And I think what hurt a lot, most of these people that were leaving were the senior citizens.
So many people had to move out and lost a lot of the stability that they had in this community, and they moved to other communities. They didn't have that type of stability.
If the past is an example, then history has proven time and again that this is an area of resilience. One recent example is this late-night arson which gutted the old St. Peter Claver School, but spared the 90-year-old church.
2, 3. All right.
This beacon of Lampton Street has new life. It has been upfitted and remodeled as an office to lend housing assistance to those from Shepherd Square.
We were all able to step up to the plate when it was needed most and get the church completed.
Basically what your results say is that you're pretty much 20-20 on everything except your right eye was 20-30 on distance, but that's pretty much considered normal for this screening, so this kind of indicates that
The Presbyterian Community Center also has a new home. Building strong families remains a critical task and was evident during an annual health fair that attracted hundreds. It was also a time to show off the Smoketown Kaleidoscope Project. That is a chronology of the people, places, and events that have made a difference in this neighborhood.
You can disarm anything with a smile. Any problem that you might have, if you're entering with a smile.
Raising self-esteem is carried out at Mazik Middle School, named after the well-respected educator Albert E. Mazik, who was the former principal of the school when it was called Jackson Junior High. Several new building initiatives are taking shape and form to provide affordable housing, and investment is coming back to Preston Street.
All that land over there where there were all kind of stores, all kind of shopping, I'd like to see that come back. I'd like to see neighborhood stores come back in this area.
The future here is also connected to the pioneers. Elements of the story are delivered right on Broadway. Several places, including a church, rest home, and the street, honor the memory of Washington Spradling. And the many gifts of William Shepherd are noted on Hancock Street, plainly in the middle of Shepherd Square, a housing project that bears his name.
The project was just, I won't say heaven, but it was awfully nice. We had steam heat, and it was warm and dry, and it was just perfect. So in my time going up there to Smoketown and living there, I thought we were affluent. My goodness.
The Old Eastern Library is a daycare center. What used to be Jewish Hospital offers affordable housing. Entertainment establishments aren't as plentiful. There are a few surviving time's test. Gone are places like the Circle Bar, the J&H, and the Old Blue Moon.
I think there are many indigenous neighborhoods like this. Smoketown, California, Park Hill, that we've all lost sight of, that were indigenous little neighborhoods. Limerick, if you ask the common people in Louisville, where's Limerick? They have no idea. That's around St. Louis Bertrand's Catholic Church. I think that's what we've lost, an identity of the neighborhoods.
It's not just business and housing opportunities finding a way back here. Little Flock Baptist is also planning an expansion. A new place of worship signals change, but there's other observations in this landscape.
It's a very eclectic community. On any time of the day, you can see Asians, Ethiopians, Hispanics, just walking in their native garb, and it's neat.
Rolling with the changes is a way of life here, and those with deep ties are hoping that the good old days in Smoketown aren't a thing of the past.
Somebody needs to know that Smoketown was the birthplace of a lot of good people. A lot of good things come out of here, and I am what I am today because I was born and raised in Smoketown.
When the Presbyterian Community Center moved into its new home back in 2001, a brick wall was put up in the lobby, showcasing the achievements and the accomplishments of individuals from this very neighborhood. It is a long list of people to recognize, and for those that we did not mention, we say thank you for your important contributions. As a native, it is easy to agree with the voices that you've heard from, that Smoketown is a place providing lessons that will last a lifetime. The Smoketown, a tradition to treasure. I'm Steve Krupp. Thanks so much for joining us.
Oh, Smoketown, here this bright Saturday. I remember this place years ago. Cooking school, sewing school, games to play, houses on the street, Rosaline, Hancock, Finza, Lambton too, playing ball in the street, plenty things to do. Peach cobblers, cabbage, cornbread, Aunt Sophie, you're keeping heaven fed. Church on Sunday, you better go. Old Basement Moore Baptist Church, singing and shouting, still there, you know. Schools, library, Dixie Theater too, right here in Smoketown. It was lots to do. Okay. All right. Okay.